York Times chairman Arthur Ox Sulzberger Jr. transformed the venerable Gray Lady into a global digital media powerhouse, positioning the Times to carry on its tradition of holding power to account well into the 21st century.
The mission of the paper today is very much what the mission of the paper has always been. It's to be honest, straightforward, reliable.
During his time as publisher, the New York Times won 61 Pulitzer Prizes. This past year, the Times shared the Public Service Prize with the New Yorker for their explosive investigations into allegations of sexual misconduct that led to the fall of Fox News host Bill O'Reilly and Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. The article sparked the Me Too movement that continues to reverberate. The Times also shared the 2018 National Reporting Award with The Washington Post for their in-depth coverage of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and the connections to the Trump campaign. With the President of the United States constantly denigrating much of the media as fake news,
typical New York Times fake stories,
the New York Times has stood firm, continuing to report the truth.
For people to come to our journalism, they have to be able to trust that we are not slanted and that we're there to provide facts and context.
Sulzberger served as publisher of the Times for a quarter of a century before transitioning to the role of chairman this year. He took the reins from his father and mentor, Arthur Ox Sulzberger Sr., in 1992. The Times has been a family tradition since 1896, when Sulzberger Jr.'s great-grandfather, Adolph Ox, bought the newspaper. Sulzberger didn't start out at the top. He worked in the London bureau of the Associated Press in the 70s, before moving over to the Times first as a correspondent in the Washington bureau, then as a New York reporter and assistant editor before delving into the business side.
When I was told that I needed to move to the business side, to advertising, I committed in my head that I would do it for a year, I would hate it, and I'd go back and fulfill my career in the newsroom. And to my utter amazement, I actually enjoyed ad sales.
Early in his tenure as publisher, he oversaw the paper's national expansion. In 1996, he established the Times Online. Today, the digital news organization has more than 3.8 million paid subscriptions, 2.9 million of them digital only.
To have that reach, to have readers, subscribers, digital subscribers around the world the way we do, really speaks to what this institution has to offer.
In 2003, the company bought out the Washington Post's share of the International Herald Tribune, and in 2013, renamed it the International New York Times. There are now more international bureaus than ever before, from Beijing to Kabul, London to Nairobi. Sulzberger says one of his greatest accomplishments was the expansion of the Times' large staff. New York Times executive editor Dean Baquet.
And if you think about the international stories that occurred during his age, the unsuccessful U.S. involvement in Iraq, the struggles in Afghanistan, the dramatic changes in Europe, and the New York Times was able to cover those stories, I would argue, better than everybody else, because Arthur made sure that we had the resources to have people on the ground during those tumultuous times.
In 1997, he introduced color to the front page. In 2012, the Times published the 6-part multimedia project Snowfall. The multi-chapter series integrated video and graphics into the traditional narrative. It won a Pulitzer Prize and a Peabody. One of the biggest changes at the Times happened this past January, when Sulzberger Jr. became chairman and his son A.G. Sulzberger took over as publisher.
There were all of these great newspaper families all across America that controlled big newspapers. Only one still has its newspaper, and that would be the Sulzberger family, and I think Arthur gets the credit for that.
As chairman, his focus now is working with the board of directors on a strategy for the future, a strategy that remains committed to fact-based reporting and thoughtful opinion while exploring new ways to expand the news organization's reach.
For the Times to continue its success, we need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to recognize that we have to push the envelope. We need to have the courage to make decisions, recognizing that sometimes things aren't going to work out. But that if you don't fail occasionally, you're not trying hard enough.